Woody Cop, brother. Good evening. Good to see you, brother Nasser. Just so thankful to have this time to interview you, my brother and friend.
Sure.
And friends, those who don't know, Nasser has an incredible testimony on a link either above the video or below the video. I'll probably connect some of his YouTube links of his testimony. You guys could just hear it and be really blessed by like the short version, the mid version, the longer version. Enough. But just want to say
Whatever
thank
you like.
you, whatever you like. Thank you for making time here, and really
Yeah.
excited about this platform, so we could talk, especially about like your experience, like with missions and training people, and
Mhm.
cross cultural is the world in which you live, the water in which you swim. So let's just get straight to it, brother Nasser. What's some advice or some
Sure.
that you would give or recommend for people
Mhm.
who considering long-term cross-cultural missions?
Yeah, that's a great question. And and these are principles that aren't didn't come from me. I just want to give credit where credit's due. A good dear brother of mine who has been my partner overseas in Saudi Arabia with his family. They've been there, I think, now over 10 years, and spent several years just observing and early on all of the turnover of the worker community in Arabia. And obviously, it's a very hard, difficult context. It was, especially at that time, it was very difficult to get into the countries. Often you had to go under, some kind of a work permit situation, and there's a lot of challenges. But they just watched like so many people going home, majority of people not lasting more than probably 3 years. And so then my dear brother is, very analytically minded. And so he just started spending a couple years really watching and paying attention and looking for what are the key markers of the people who end up sticking it out long term versus those who, for one reason or another, end up having to leave the field far earlier than they would have intended. And there's three things that he noticed, and so the first one is that it is super super important before you ever set foot into long-term missions. You need to have a strong relationship with your local church and be sent by your local church. That doesn't mean you can't work with a missions agency, some kind of sending agency. Like that's fine, but those agencies are not a replacement for a local church. And I think most all the big ones that I know would say that very clearly. You need to be, they're not your church. They can provide all kinds of things and logistics and HR and maybe some member care. um, I know that every agency I talk to, people complain about their member care. It's kind of a universal thing. But really, like what you want is you need to have a spiritual family back home for you, whoever home is, that has discerned with you this call and have affirmed that call. And they have laid hands on you, and that can be literal or not, depending on your denominational persuasion. But they are, physically or symbolically like laying hands and sending you as a church to wherever God has called you. And why is that important? Because um, wherever you land, it doesn't have to be like Middle East, but things are going to get hard at some point. Stuff's going to come up, adjusting to different culture, different cultural perspective, all of that, different rhythms of life. All of these are hard, and we war against an enemy that is not flesh and blood, and spiritual attack is a real thing. And when all the spiritual attacks come at you and come at your family, um, and you're calling back home and kind of hopefully you have a relationship where you can be honest and just share like, oh, I'm really struggling, whatever. What my friend observed is that churches that were never really behind the call to begin with are actually the first ones saying, either on the phone or an email. Oh, this probably isn't God's will for you. You should come back. We didn't want to send you anyway. Like we we didn't want to lose you, right? Like, and if you have anything like that going on, oh my goodness, it's just like a free ticket back home. It helps you to just feel good about it. Yeah, you're right. I probably wasn't called here. I'm just gonna pack up my things and leave the field because this is too hard. I'll just go back and serve on the mission board at my home church. And they're happy too, because they never really wanted you gone anyway, right? So what you want is you want to have a church, and I've seen this, that when you're calling home and crying and like, I don't know if I can do this, they're going to say to you what Paul said to Timothy when Timothy was writing home and saying, oh, I don't know if I can do this. This is too hard. I'm too young, right? Like, no, you stick it out. You stick it out. Remember when the elders of our church laid hands on you and affirmed this is from God. This is your assignment for God. So unless God tells you to go home, you're going to stay there. We'll come visit you. We'll come support you. And that's the other thing about having a church that's really in your corner on whatever your assignment is they won't be able to help themselves. Like they're going to send visits. They're going to make do wellness checks and all of those things. They're going to be, if you're not sending out a regular newsletter, they're going to be hounding you for updates because they're invested, because they were invested from day one before you ever got on a plane. So that's thing number one. You got to have a local church that is with you on this mission assignment. Um, number two, this is for when you get in to country now. You need to be part of some kind of team on the ground. Missions is not a solo sport. It's not for lone wolf pioneers. Like if it ever was, I know we all hear the stories, but I guarantee you, even most of our mission heroes, if you actually study their biographies, they weren't actually, maybe they're the famous one, but they were always part of a team. They weren't by themselves. And those who did go off by themselves usually weren't very successful. You need to have brothers and sisters in Christ. And even the apostles operate this way in the New Testament if you're paying attention, right? Paul, a few times that Paul went somewhere solo, like Athens, didn't work out very well for him. All the churches that we saw being planted in Acts were done as part of a team effort, because you don't have all the gifts and your brother and sister in Christ beside you doesn't have all the gifts. But when we come together as a body, man, we're so much more robust. And we're also able to spiritually support one another. We're able to emotionally and physically support one another. If one family's really struggling, maybe their kids have just been sick one after another for 3 months straight, and they're just losing their minds. To have another couple or family come and let's give you a break, let's take care of you. Maybe somebody needs to be taken to a doctor in another city, right? To have that community support is super, super important. Also, people that get it, they're in the context with you. They're struggling with the same things you're struggling, and there's going to be moments when you're feeling really high and they're feeling really low, and you can support them, you can encourage them with your faith. And there'll be times where the tables are turned and you're really low, and they're just in a great place of abiding with Christ, and they can encourage and support you. And that's just like so important to have that, have people in the times get sent through a mission agency, and maybe it's a small organization, so they can't send you with a team. So guess what? Get comfortable with finding team somewhere, even if it's across denominational lines. My perspective has been, at least in the Middle East and North Africa, what the divisions we have in North America between each other like start to fizzle and dissolve when you're on a really hard context like that. My goodness, like you're just happy for a brother and sister in Christ that will pray with you, that can gather and worship with you, all of that. So you got to have either a team or a plan to join, be seconded, however that word goes, to some other team on the ground, that you're really with them and have that accountability also on the ground, and they know who your local church is or who your sending agency and all of that. If you don't have that, again, you'll burn out.
Mhm.
You'll burn out so fast.
Yeah.
The final thing is you have to have a commitment especially in the first 2 or 3 years, that you, wherever you've landed, your primary objective is actually not to be out trying to make as many disciples as you can. It's not to try to share the gospel with X number of people every day or every week or every month. Actually, your first 2 or 3 years, your number one focus should be learning the local language and culture and the context that you've been sent. If you spend the majority of your time learning that up front, you can spend the whole rest of your life now sharing the gospel, making disciples, helping, see churches planted, all of that. But if you don't, if you put off learning language, if you think, I can kind of get by with English or whatever your native language is, and a few words in the local, you're gonna have so many relationships where you only get so far and then you run into the language barrier, and if you're not able to connect the dots to answer their spiritual questions. You're not able, when they push back on your gospel presentation, you're not really able to give satisfactory answers. You're not able to give that defense
Mhm.
for the faith that you have. So you kind of think of learning language as like your primary apologetic, because it doesn't matter what other Bible verses you have in your back pocket and theology you've taken. If you can't actually articulate it to the person sitting across from you, what good is it? That
Mhm.
has to be your number one. And I see too many people make that a secondary or
Yeah.
even a tertiary goal. It has to be your primary,
Right.
or you will not last. You'll have enough opportunities that'll slip through your fingers because you weren't able to do it. And then you've got life is hard and family suffering, all the other things that are always going on. And that will be the excuse that you give up.
Mm.
You'll be like, I've been here 10 years. I still can't share my own testimony in the local language. What am I doing here? I've learned some things. I'll just go somewhere else where people understand me.
Mhm. Yep.
But if you learn the language, man, it's an investment for the rest of your ministry.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, man. Those are
Sure.
uh just crucial, golden. What's something that you would say to watch out for as you have literally traveled around the world, travel with different teams, have been in cross-cultural experience with people who are Americans just visiting, short-term people. You've interacted
Hmm.
with long-term people. You interact a lot with national leaders within their own context. Like, what are some pitfalls or some examples that you could give us of, like, hey guys, here's the type of attitude that you shouldn't have, or here's like what not
Hmm.
to, or here's some things that you need to check at the door of your own
Yeah.
context or culture or expectation.
Hmm. Again, I have three things. You ask me about any topic, I'll usually have three things I can share about it. Yeah. And before that little caveat, so what I just shared, obviously, this is geared towards people looking at long-term assignment somewhere. I obviously not don't expect people going on a short-term 1 week, 2 week, 6 week mission trip somewhere to kind of learn the language. Like that's when it's okay to just get out there and use what you have, speak English with people you could speak English with or whatever. Yeah, all of those things. Like don't that, I'm not that wasn't really for short term. For short term, I would say what's really important is you really need to make sure that the person or the team that's coming over has had a really good orientation, whether wherever they came from, and if they didn't, and honestly, I think it's sometimes better to have that orientation in both places because you're going to hear it once and a lot of stuff isn't going to quite connect for you and it's going to slip through, but you'll still have had like a first shot at it. And then you get into the country and now some of the things you heard before are making sense. And now you have a whole lot more questions that you didn't have when you're getting trained in North America or wherever. And so then it's just good to run through it again. I just find that just spending a day or two just focused on really orienting people well to here's the culture, here's the context, here's kind of the common spiritual needs or perspective, worldview of the local people here. And here's how you can be helpful, or here's the things that you should be watching for. Here's things you can be praying for. And it just helps focus people in for that short term to just make it as helpful as possible. What's really sad is when people go on a trip and they come back and then they find things out later like, oh, I wish I'd known that. I wish I'd understood what I was seeing here. I was just so confused and hung up on that. I wasn't really able to lean fully in to maybe some opportunities that God opened up for me, whatever. So orientation is really, really important. Um, and then I would say equally as important, if not more so, is having a really solid debrief after the short-term trip. And I'm sure you've heard as many horror stories as me. It's like how many people get messed up by a short-term mission trip spiritually because they've seen things that they don't quite know how to unpack. They come back maybe feeling guilty, not knowing how to re-enter life back home. Maybe they've had an amazing kind of this mountaintop spiritual experience with the Lord, but nobody back in their home community quite gets it. And so now they feel isolated and cut off, like so many things. So you need to have a really good debrief to help people process what they experienced, what they saw, what they heard, what they did, and then maybe even help them discern like maybe what next steps for them are. You know, it may not be a long-term assignment in that place, but maybe the Lord's calling them to start an intentional prayer group paying for this particular country or this particular people. Who knows what it might be? But I often find that people can't, especially if they're not somebody who's in full-time ministry, right? They don't have the tools and the training that you or I have. And so they need someone to come alongside and just compassionately help them figure out where they go from here. Now, when it comes to like what are good, I call these like the postures or attitudes of being an ambassador.
Yeah.
Whether you're short-term, long-term, tourist, wherever we are meant to be ambassadors of Christ in his kingdom. And people that I have observed that are fruitful in being an ambassador, you know, in inviting people into the kingdom and actually, um, you know, building relationships in a way that actually result in new brothers and sisters in Christ. There's three things that I'd see. Number one is humility. You gotta approach this work with an abundance of humility. I think that's Christ-like. I think we have no better example of humility than Jesus himself,
Mhm.
in every aspect of his ministry, even in his coming and taking on our flesh. So incredibly humble, and that can be difficult if you're from a more wealthy or privileged background or society. You might feel like, you know, some part of you looks down. You go into what's often called the third world, or, you know, into nations where, you know, the most of the people would live below what we consider the poverty line, all of that, and think, oh, because I'm well off and they're not, we're somehow superior than them. You know, you just gotta check all of that at the door, all of that arrogance. It's not useful. Nobody's in other parts of the world are impressed by that stuff, really, you know, as much as we think they are. They might be polite because they're hospitable people, but yeah, like that, you're not winning points by coming in, you know, we're the North American Western saviors of the world. Look at all our money and education and power. Like, no, you got to lay all of that down and come in low and come in ready to serve and not be served.
Mm.
The other thing which kind of builds on that, you need to cultivate a posture of curiosity.
Mm.
You need to be curious. And for some people, because of their own personality, this comes easier than others. And if it comes easy for you, great. If it doesn't, start working at that. Start building that muscle, you know. Learn to ask good questions. Good questions are questions that don't result in just a yes or a no, but result in, you know, maybe a paragraph of explanation. And then as they're talking, like listen for other hooks to draw more out of them. Don't come in. This is again where the humility piece intersects. Don't come in thinking, oh, I read a book about these people. Oh, I went through an orientation. Oh, I watched some video of some guy on YouTube telling me about Muslims or Buddhists, and this is how they all are. The reality is human beings are individuals. Even in, group or community oriented cultures, like much of Asia and the Middle East is, um, yeah, there's like what the group believes, but then there's what this individual knows and actually practices. And how are you going to know? Unless you ask questions. If
Mhm.
you walk up to someone thinking, well, by looking at you, I know what you believe about God or gods or no God. I know how you live your life. I know everything about, man, you're just priming the wall to go up and, nobody wants. But if you come in and like, hey, I don't actually know anything about you. I'd love to learn though. I'd like to learn who you are. And you just ask those questions. So you're a Muslim, you're a Buddhist. What does that mean to you? What does that look like? How does that help you navigate challenges in life? And don't ask with like trying to get to a certain answer or be manipulative because people smell that out, but just to really understand who this person is, that they've been on a journey long before you met them. God's probably been speaking to them before you showed up. And how are you going to be able to discern that and know what their felt spiritual needs are unless you take the time to ask and really listen and wait for the right opportunity to share all the things that you want to share with them. I often find that the people you want to share with will actually listen to you if you've done them the courtesy of doing that first, of modeling that, of asking questions and seeking to know, really employing that curiosity. And then the final thing is just sincerity. Because if you try to be humble, but you're faking it, it's not going to work. If you try to be curious, but you're faking it, you're actually just asking questions, waiting for your chance to talk and not really listening. People can tell. If you're treating every person that you meet on the street like a project, like an item on a checklist, it's not going to result in a fruitful conversation or a healthy relationship. And so you need to be sincere. And if you're just sit there right now saying vulnerably saying, I want to be sincere, but I just don't have it. I've got so much other stuff in me. Well, that's where we take that to Jesus.
Yeah.
And we need to spend maybe some time with him
Mm.
in the secret place and in prayer before we go out and try to take things that we don't have yet to other people. Right? Everything that we share about God, everything um when we talk about his kingdom, like we can't give away things that we don't have.
Yep.
We can't confess a Lord that we don't know.
Mhm.
So if I'm feeling kind of thin in those areas, then that's a good sign. I actually need some intimacy time with Jesus. I need some more time in prayer. I need more time, in the Word of God, and to be filled up with Him. And that's what we're giving. That's what we're sharing. The overflow of what God is already doing in our lives is what we're trying to give away.
Mm. Amen. That's beautiful, man. I was going to ask you, there's like two other questions I was going to ask you, but I feel like you already answered one of them. I was going to ask you just about
Yeah.
ministering shame honor cultures, but it
Hmm.
seems you
Yeah.
kind of answer that and how we approach that culture and
Hmm.
that community and that individual with honor, respect, sincerity, like
Hmm.
passion, right? And
Right.
we're talking as well with those of us in the West coming from more affluent, privileged countries to others. I don't feel like it's. Correct me if I'm wrong, brother. I don't feel like it's all that helpful if we just come and we just like really pity them. Oh, those poor people with their infrastructure, and oh,
Yeah.
must be so sad. And man, look at how much we have. And but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's really helpful, as opposed to
Mm-mm.
saying, like, hey, you know what? I may have more material things, but it looks like they're rich, and then go down the list and family,
Right.
love and joy and like the fruit of the
Yeah.
spirit of peace and of hope and of enjoying the
Hmm.
little things and being grateful for the small things in their life, right? Like
Hmm.
I think approaching them like that is more honoring than just saying like, oh, those, poor pathetic people. Like I don't even know how they get by. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I feel like
Absolutely. Yeah,
the
it's really important for us to realize, and hopefully this goes with the humility piece, that every culture and society on the planet has amazing kingdom things in its DNA.
yep,
And because we're all made in the image of God, and because we've all sinned and fall short of his glory, there's messed up, broken aspects to every society and culture, including the Western ones,
and that's
right? And so I and you'll find whatever you're looking for. You know, Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount about having a good eye versus a bad eye. And the way I read that is that if you look for the good, you'll find it. And if you look for the bad, you'll find it. And so you're already, when you're in a cross you're doing some kind of cross-cultural activity, you can't help but find all the things that are unfamiliar, uncomfortable, maybe even repulsive to you. Like those things are going to jump out automatically. You don't even have to try to look for them sometimes.
right, right.
But make a point to look for the good. Make a point to look for where the God image is imprinted on this culture. And that will help you fall in love with a people and a place that, if you weren't sent there, you might not want to be there. You might not choose to be there if it was up to you, right? But you can fall in love with a people by seeking to look for that image of God
Hmm,
in them and in their culture.
that's good. That's good. Let me finish with this. Last question is, how would you encourage a family, a team who has gone overseas and
Hmm.
had an incredible experience, right? They met global workers and they met national leaders and they heard their
Hmm.
testimony, heart, and they come back and they say, man, I feel like my life's changed because that was so incredible in their faith and this and that. How would
Yeah.
you encourage them in like maybe really like practical and or relational or long-term ways to continue to kind of like support the ministries, the communities, the people, the global workers, whatever, and that they've come across, as opposed to just being another trip that just kind of comes, swoops in, comes through, takes pictures, you know what I mean, tell
Yeah.
story. Then here on this side of the ocean, you know what I mean, there's that disconnect and we never hear
Hmm.
from them again, or what have you. What's some practical ways that you would suggest?
Yes. So, there's two ways you could go at this. You can go at the personal responsibility, which is very Western, that, you went on this trip, it's kind of up to you now to make this a milestone moment in your life or not. Like you could treat it like just another trip. You could treat it like a vacation that you went on for Jesus. Or you can take it upon yourself to stay connected to the people you visited. Often people are exchanging contact info and then they never message that person, they never email, they never, right? They just move on. Or you cannot do that. You can just actually, hey, reach out and, a few weeks later, a month later, and say, hey, man, thank you again. I still remember such and such, that we did, and it was really meaningful to me. And how can I be praying for you? Like you can build relationships with people a long distance. And I know, you know, missionaries often appreciate people that don't just, maybe read the newsletter, maybe don't, but actually respond, that send those personal messages. Like we both know that's actually rare. You can have a newsletter that goes out to hundreds of people and you might only get 2 or 3 replies. Hey, I really appreciate you sharing that. We're praying for this, we're praying for that. And wow, how meaningful that is, right? And so just know that you can do that. You can choose to do that. But, I also, coming now from more Eastern perspective, I think it's helpful to not put it all on the individual, but actually whatever group, whatever leadership arranged for that trip and that visit to follow up on their side.
Right.
So if it's, the mission pastor who kind of organized the trip at some local church here in the US, like reconnect, bring you do the debrief, but then maybe a month later bring those people back together, take them out to lunch, have some more conversations, talk about next steps, right? Follow up with the people that that you invited on this trip to begin with, like that, just to help them figure out, how do I fit in these experiences and this stuff in me that will never be the same? How do I incorporate that into my life going forward? What does that look like? What does that mean? How can I stay connected? If it's, hearts captured for the Muslim people, oh my goodness, there's so many websites and organizations that are around praying for Muslims every month. Maybe you want to join one of those groups to stay connected to the larger picture, or maybe it's praying for a specific country. Um, but I find that the both and usually, catches more people than one or the other. And so, yeah, tell people that they're individually responsible to, you know, continue on with whatever God has stirred up in them, but then also from the organizational level, whether that's the church or an agency or whatever, follow up with people who've gone on a short-term trip and continue to walk with them on their journey. Some people I might find that, you feel like, oh, I really feel like they're called to long-term mission. They went on the short-term trip, but they're kind of in this, not sure. Maybe they're about to get married. Usually they're about to get married. And so like, oh, I can't think about this right now. Right. But continue to walk with those people. And sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because you've continued to follow up and that continue to stoke whatever fire God lit in their hearts about missions. Now they're ready, and now they're ready to go because you continue to keep that candle burning for them.
That's good. That's good. And to your point, bro, it means a lot, that ongoing piece of being connected, because on this, we love to be connected. We love to be remembered. We love to be thought of. We love to be prayed for. We love to be
Yeah.
reminded that, we aren't forgotten, because we recognize that life goes on, that everyone gets busy, like out of sight,
Yeah.
out of mind. So that, like, we understand, we get that, but
Sure.
that encouragement, that birthday letter, or we go back and we come back and we're given some gifts to give to our national league,
Yeah.
or especially the
Right.
teams. It's rare, but especially the teams who come through that say, like, man, this is how you minister to these people. Like, man, I could,
Mhm.
maybe I'm a college student or a single mom or a single
Mhm.
dad, or, maybe we don't have much, but we could, not go
Yeah.
out to, like, once a month and not do Starbucks once a month. And we could, help those families and those kids that we met, you know what I mean? To be
You
part
can
of,
actually do this where you live.
right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, you could, yeah, you could actually do that where, where you live, and also kind of, be part
Yeah.
of blessing here in, Southeast Asia or the Middle East, or, Southern
Anywhere.
America, or whatever. So yeah, it's beautiful to know that we're in this together, because when we open our house, like, quite often actually, and when we do, like, provide meals for people, or like special meals, or what have you, when we say, hey, we'll foot the bill, or we will take care of that this time. And when many people are thanking me and Tracy, I get to say, it's not just us. We're the face, but we literally have hundreds of, like, families and a couple dozen churches or whatever,
Yeah.
that, you know what I mean? Like, they're partnering with us, and they love you. Like, we just get to deliver
Mhm.
the gift. So anyways, just to your point,
Yes.
that connection of community being together, it's crucial, man.
Yes.
Really important. Yeah, my man.
Exactly. We're a body.
Yeah, come on. Anyhow, hey, want to say thank you. We could talk about this all day or all night. Thank you so much, brother Nasser. We appreciate it. Thank you for your ministry and your work for Jesus, and just your
Thank you,
part of
brother.
the gospel as well. So yeah, Lord bless you, and
You
have a
too.